person. You are truly a blessing, and I pray that we will all receive a word from the Lord this morning. So let's start with a quick word of prayer. Will you join me? Lord, may your spirit be among us, opening our ears to that which you need to tell us on this day. May the words of my mouth and the meditation of all of our hearts be acceptable in your sight, O Lord, our rock and our Redeemer. Amen. Well, this is one of those passages where I can almost see the disciples and their reactions as Jesus speaks. Jesus is standing there telling them, "You are the salt of the earth." Now, this is good news, really good news. For people living in Jesus' time, salt was a really important thing. Not only did it make your food taste better, but they used it to preserve food. Think pickled vegetables and beef jerky. This is how you had food to eat during the season when you couldn't grow things. Salt made it so that you did not starve. Salt was so important, you could trade with it like money. To be called the salt of the earth was a really good thing. Then Jesus tells the disciples that they are the light of the world. Jesus tells them to let their light shine before others that God might be glorified. The disciples were supposed to go and spread the gospel, the good news. And through that, God would be glorified, and the disciples would be a light in the darkness, the light of the world. And you can just see the disciples standing there smiling, laughing at each other like, "Oh yeah, we're good, real good." And then Jesus drops the ball. "I came not to abolish the law, but to fulfill it. Not one letter of the law will pass away until all is accomplished." And then Jesus tells them that they must exceed the righteousness of the scribes and Pharisees, and unless they do, they will never enter the kingdom of heaven. Okay, this was not good news. I'm going to stop for a second so you'll definitely know. Here we go. In Jesus' time, most people never fulfilled the law. They didn't have the time or the resources to fulfill the law. Because in order to fulfill the law, you had to remain ritually clean. And remaining ritually clean took an enormous amount of time and work. For most people, it just wasn't possible. And then there were certain jobs that made you ritually unclean. For those folks, you were just out of luck. This is why the Pharisees kind of lorded themselves over everybody else because they kept. The Pharisees lorded themselves over everyone else because they kept all the laws. And they spent the majority of their time making sure they did everything just right. This meant that the Pharisees could call themselves ritually clean and holy, and therefore fit to stand before God. They could declare themselves righteous. They were so concerned about being ritually clean that they wouldn't even sit down to eat with someone who wasn't a Pharisee, because that person might not be ritually clean, and if they weren't ritually clean, well, ew. I mean, they just didn't take the risk. Now, this is a New Testament passage. And I could swear that in the scripture we just read, that Jesus said that we, you and I, should be fulfilling the law. The Mosaic law, the Old Testament law. And even though the just said that fulfilling the law was impossible for most people in Jesus' time, instructions. You know, something like do the laundry. Do they want you to wash the clothes? Or wash and dry the clothes? Or wash, dry, and fold the clothes? Or wash, dry, and hang the clothes and iron some of them? And should I put them away? Like, what do they want? Doing the laundry seems pretty clear. And you can see how one simple command can lead to a bunch of questions. If the law was handed down by God to Moses on Mount Sinai, and when God finished laying down the law, well, God was not really available for the question and answer period afterwards. So a simple command like, cleanse yourself before entering the temple, leads to all sorts of questions. Like, do I just wash my face and hands? Or should I wash my feet too, because they are really dirty? Or do I wash my whole body? And if I do I have to do it in any specific order? Do I have to use special water? Questions like this led to all sorts of discussions. Discussions that the city elders would have while they were sitting at the city gates. They would sit there and discuss the political issues of the day. They would settle up some legal matters like this person might prosecute that person. And then they would discuss the law. The law, as it was written in the books of Deuteronomy, and exactly how this law should be fulfilled. And those discussions led to a bunch of writings called the Mishnah. 63 tractates that describe exactly how to fulfill the law. Things like how to cleanse yourself before entering the temple. In English, the Mishnah is 800 pages long. It is extremely detailed. And in my mind, I imagine a father sitting with the Mishnah open in his lap, reading the laws and trying to teach his son how to cleanse himself before entering the temple. Okay, son, you wash your hands in the sacred water. Make sure the water drips down to your elbow. And dry your hands with the white towel. Okay. Wash your hands again. Make sure the water drips down to your elbow. And dry your hands with the white towel. Wipe each hand 3 times. So between each finger once, son, 3 times on the hands. Okay, start again. Wash your hands. Make sure the water drips down to your elbow. And dry your hands with the white towel. Make sure to wipe each hand 3 times. And between each finger once. Fantastic. Okay, now your face. Wash your face in the sacred water. Let the water drip off your chin and dry your face with the brown towel. The brown towel. Praise God. Okay, son, start again. Wash your hands in the sacred water. Make sure to let it drip off your elbow. The funny thing is that if you read the Gospels, you notice that Jesus is not much for following all those little laws. At least not the law as it was described in the Mishnah. In fact, his failure to follow what we could call the Mishnaic laws is what gets the Pharisees so riled up about Jesus in the first place. He heals people on the Sabbath. He eats with sinners. Ew. And did you ever see a passage in the Bible about Jesus washing anything other than the disciples' feet? Their feet? Ew. So if Jesus isn't following all of these laws, why does he say that we should? Well, he doesn't. I'll tell you why. It goes like this. I'll turn on these points for you. Hold on. Turn me off for a second. Okay. I am going to do this. There we go. Oh, here we go. The cross can just be on. Y'all know I'm a Christian. You don't need to see the cross. Praise the Lord. All right, it goes like this. My kids and I were in a car. This was a bunch of years ago. My daughter Alex was maybe 8 or 9, and he was in the first grade. And we were out running some errands. And Katie would not leave Alex alone. She kept poking her and tickling her and grabbing her pencil and then poking her with the pencil, and Alex was getting more and more frustrated. And finally she went, Mom, Katie won't stop touching me. And so
not that Katie was being obnoxious to her sister, because that's kind of given between siblings. It was that she knew exactly what I wanted from her, and instead of doing it, she chose to follow the letter of the law instead of the intent. So when I yelled at her for being obnoxious, she said, "But Mom, I'm not touching Alex. You said not to touch Alex. It's not fair. I did what you said." Again, justified homicide comes to mind. And this is exactly where Jesus was with the disciples. It wasn't the 800 pages of teeny tiny laws in the Mishnah that Jesus wanted the disciples to follow. It was the law that God had laid down on Sinai. And that wasn't about how you washed your hands or in what order you ate your food or whether or not it was okay to use the brown towel. It was about respect. Respect for God, respect for your fellow human, respect for your family. Have no other gods before me. Keep the Sabbath holy. Do not kill. Do not bear false witness. Honor your mother and father. Do not even covet what belongs to your neighbor, your brother, or anybody else. Be kind to the strangers in your land, for you are once slaves in Egypt. How hard can this be? Well, as awful as 800 pages of laws can seem, I have to admit, 800 pages of laws makes it a lot easier to know if you're right or not. You know, knowing when to use the white towel versus the brown towel is way easier than having to figure out how to respect your neighbor when you're being a jerk. You know what else? Once you have a big, long list of rules to follow, it makes it really easy to declare yourself righteous. All you have to do is follow the rules. And thus, we get passages like this from Matthew chapter 23, verses 22 through 25. Jesus says, "It will be horrible for you, teachers of the law and Pharisees, you hypocrites. It is true that you give God 10% of everything you have. You even give Him 10% of your spices, mint, dill, and cumin. But you forget about the more important things in the law. Being fair to other people, giving mercy and faith. You should always tithe. But you must remember to do the more important things too. You are without wisdom. You strain out the gnat and swallow the camel." And that's what I mean about tiny little laws. The Pharisees were so busy doing everything just right so that they could consider themselves righteous, so busy counting dill seeds that they were missing the big stuff, the important stuff like mercy, justice, equality, and faith. They were substituting the rules for righteousness, and following the rules will never be a substitute for true faith. This is why Jesus wanted the disciples to follow the law, the intent of the law. Jesus is talking about love and mercy and not turning away from the needs of the poor, not trampling the rights of the oppressed. Loving your neighbor as you love yourself and realizing that everyone, everywhere, is your neighbor. And then I'll bet that you're sitting here thinking, "I get it. I totally get that." And you're thinking that this is not a problem for us. But the truth is that most Christianity has crept into the United Methodist Church just like it's crept into every other church. I want you to stop and think for a moment. What does it mean to take the Lord's name in vain? I'll bet some of you thought of cursing, didn't you? You thought about the bad words. And we call them bad words not because they are enumerated in the Bible with a big "thou shalt nots" with a verse next to them. No, we call them bad words because someone somewhere said that these words are less than proper and good Christians should not say them. And if you put those words in proximity to the Lord's name, that's what taking the Lord's name in vain is about, right? No. Taking the Lord's name in vain is when you take an oath in God's name, like in court, and then you lie, as in perjury or bearing false witness. Taking the Lord's name in vain is when you say that God is on our side and not on the side of our enemy. You know, let's go kill those godless ways to call ourselves righteous and neighbor unrighteous. No rights to claim that God is exclusively on our side. Righteousness does not equal all the rules. Righteousness equals respect. Respect for our neighbor, respect for the planet, respect for God. And the truth is that respecting others is a lot harder than 800 pages of rules, because what respect looks like changes from situation to situation, and there will be no way to know for sure that we've done it right. This is why our theologian, John Wesley, said that Christian perfection does not mean that we don't sin and that we don't screw up. Christian perfection isn't about doing it right. It's about love. That the motivation of our hearts is love, no matter what we're doing. Love becomes the ground for every action we choose, every word that we speak, every thought that we have. And isn't it a lot harder to disrespect someone when you love them, when they matter to you? Doesn't it hurt you inside when you disrespect somebody that you love? So let's do the math. Righteousness equals respect, and love equals respect. Therefore, for the transitive property of math, righteousness equals love. If we want to be righteous, our lives need to be grounded in love. Every thought and every action grounded in love, just as Christ's thoughts and actions were grounded in love. Remember, love is the most important commandment. Jesus said so himself. In Matthew chapter 26, verses 38 and 37 and 38, Jesus said, "Love the Lord your God with all your soul, with all your heart, with all your mind, and with all your strength." This is the first and greatest commandment. And the second is like it. Love your neighbor as yourself. All the law and the prophets